My son said, "You can stay if you babysit." I changed the diaper, then changed the deed. They didn't know I funded that $1.50 home and could take it back with one call. I did not ask to stay. I was told to stay only if I babysit. Then came the words that shattered me. "You are not even worth my child's diaper." I wasn't a ghost. Not yet. I breathed. I held life in my hands. But in that moment, I felt invisible. I froze mid-change, holding my granddaughter's tiny bottom in my wrinkled hands, while my daughter's voice cut through me like sharp glass. "Finish that diaper and get out. This is my house, not a nursing home." She did not stop there. "If you want to stay, you must do work. Babysit, clean, be quiet. This house does not house slackers." Those words echoed in the living room, where my son's colleagues and friends sat chatting over wine. I felt the warmth of the room shift to cold disapproval. I lowered my gaze, too stunned to speak, and my granddaughter, barely 8, whose cheek I had just kissed, looked at me and mimicked her mother in a whisper. "You are not really family, Grandma." It was the moment I felt transparent, evaporating. All the memories I carried, the warm breakfasts, the school projects, the lullabies, like dust in the sun. I retreated from the room slowly, the diaper still half fastened. They heard the soft click of the door behind me, and I heard laughter rise again, clean and cruel. Tears didn't come. I poured a cup of tea, cold now because I left it on the counter, lit a single candle, and placed it next to a very small vanilla cake I had baked for myself that morning. The cake was modest, just enough for one. I set it gently on the small round table in the corner of the kitchen, beside a framed photograph of my late husband smiling at me, taken years ago when hope still lived in our home. I pulled a faded rose from a vase on that table, the only flower left from the arrangement we had for our wedding anniversary, and tucked it next to the cake. Then I lit the candle, the flame flickering, fragile, brave. I closed my eyes and wished for something simpler than forgiveness. I wished for acknowledgement. I took a deep breath. I thought of all the years I had given, years teaching, years caring, years holding my family up with love they called convenience. In that hush, I told myself, they don't know, not yet, that one call is all it would take. The thought was not bitter, it was certain. I had arranged everything 2 months ago, when they thought I was too old to understand money. My name was still on the title, my savings were still untouched, and there was a lawyer ready to file the papers if I ever chose to. They had called me a freeloader, a burden, a babysitter. As I stared at the candle, I allowed myself a tiny, fierce smile. I blew it out, delicate, silent, and watched the darkness fill the room. Tonight, they think I am invisible, but they do not know that I was never powerless. The cake sat there. The rose wilted slightly in the soft wax. And in that quiet kitchen, I realized that I was not the one being defeated. I had been careful, patient, and now, that patience was about to become justice. They do not know how powerful silence can be when a woman has been erased for too long, and they certainly do not know that with one call, everything they assumed would be theirs could vanish. They see a smiling grandmother with flour on her apron and a tired candle's glow. But I leave them that image deliberately, because they do not know I can take this house with a single phone call. I swore I could still feel the weight of that metal resting on my chest, even now, decades later. I earned it under the flame of mortar fire. As the head nurse in a military field hospital, I held hands, guided breathing, and stitched wounds that no one wanted to see. I watched hundreds of soldiers cling to life because someone whispered encouragement or refused to leave them alone. I was honored with a medal, an acknowledgement from a government that I never mentioned to my son. I wore it only once, in secret, tucked under my blouse. When my son was born, I placed that medal in a drawer and dedicated my life to raising him. I exchanged the trenches for his nursery, the field hospital for late-night feedings, the steady beat of combat for lullabies. I left behind a career built on missing a memo from a general or misplacing a sanitized gown. I gave it all up for bedtime stories, scraped knees, and school plays. I still believed it was one of the finest decisions of my life. But now, as I bend to line my granddaughter's diaper just so, I hear the words that hollow every effort I made. You left your career because you were weak, not because you sacrificed. You never made anything big? My son says it bluntly, eyes cold. And my daughter-in-law adds, if you were really that competent, you would have had your own place. You would not be here in my living room babysitting. It is the sort of cruelty delivered with casual indifference that leaves deeper scars than physical harm. I stand among the crates of his trophies, her designer bags, reminders that she values every accolade, except the ones I earned, every plate I washed, every bowl of oatmeal I stirred at dawn, every whispered encouragement to her when she failed her exams. They are erased. My legacy, the home I helped shape, the love I poured into that child, they tell me none of it matters. They measure me by my presence now, by whether I am convenient or burdensome. It is the most perverse of ironies that the woman who saved hundreds is now called a liability. I replay that memory every morning, his small hand wrapped around my index finger as I changed his diaper in the glow of a hospital nightlight. I remember telling him that he was brave enough to believe in love. I never imagined those words would make me an inconvenience. And her words fester. You do not deserve your own space. This respite we give you is charity. Implicit in that, of course, is that I am charity. They never ask how it felt to slide off a battlefield and onto a cot for a newborn. They do not ask what it cost me, the education I abandoned, the promotions I never took, the colleagues who wondered why I gave it all up. My son walks past my photographs on the mantel, framed images of me in uniform, hands folded gently, face steady, as I comforted a wounded soldier. He does not glance at them anymore. One afternoon I asked him to pass me the milk from the fridge, and he snapped, I do not pay for milk so that you can hide behind it and complain about your old stories. He meant it. My husband, rest his soul, always said that history's worth lies in its telling, but theirs lie only in the forget. So I have learned to lean into silence, to let the dust settle atop my sacrifices. Yet, I never truly left that service behind. I kept my diligence, my care, my principle burned into me. The same steady hands that held battlegrounds together now fold blankets and prepare baby bottles. The same voice that gave orders and comfort now reads fairy tales in a soft whisper. I adapt. I endure. But I never forget, because when they pretend I did not exist except for convenience, they make me more resolved to prove that my worth is not in how useful I can be, but in who I was, and still am. I watch the evening news through the kitchen window, the anchor talking about heroes. I feel a gravitational pull in my chest, not resentment, but a calm recognition that my story, these same quiet truths, deserve to be heard again. And soon, quietly, they will be. Every morning I wake before dawn. I carry cups of coffee to the kitchen and start the day washing dishes, wiping counters, stacking wood for the fireplace. By the time my son wakes, the house smells like oatmeal or fresh bread, and the laundry is neatly folded. I am everywhere, cooking, cleaning, folding, guiding my granddaughter with wordless patience, but never seen as who I am. I am treated as someone neutral, someone ornamental, someone assigned invisible labor. They never asked what I thought. Instead, they carefully redirected the conversation, so I was always behind the scenes. I wore aprons and soft shoes, not a seat at the table. I once waited to be invited to dinner and was told, "Mother, you must dress more tastefully for our company." Just a polite way of saying, "We do not want you here." I learned to choose long skirts over my old floral dresses, not because I found them indecent, but because I was made to feel they made me indecent. At a party for my daughter-in-law's promotion, the candles glowed bright, the champagne flowed, and guests asked for introductions. I stood beside someone I had taught to walk, taught to read. He looked at me awkwardly and asked, aloud, "Is she the housekeeper? Or, ah?" My daughter-in-law laughed, not even allowing the question to breathe. "She's just Mother. She probably just dressed that way because she only owns thrift store clothes," she replied. No explanation, no correction. I think they assumed they knew who I was, but they chose to ignore it. I responded with a gentle nod and a half smile. It is astonishing how silence can be sharper than words. In that moment, I saw something crack, not in their gratitude, but in mine. Years of refusal to claim airspace narrowed things too much. I recognized that I had accepted their false labels for too long. I remind myself of that evening as I fold my granddaughter's pajamas, how I did not speak when they needed me to help set the table, but feared I would overshadow their carefully curated self-picture. I stayed out of view just enough to blur out. I adored the life I was given once, but now it had become a burden to them. I sit now in a hallway just outside their living room, where laughter echoes, matching glasses clink just a few feet away. That party? Their smirk. The misrecognition they piled up inside me, years of brushing floors, wiping crumbs, reading bedtime stories they never heard, invisibly holding up the mundane scaffolding of their lives. I count the years, from the census that said I was a retired nurse, to the birth announcement they posted online where they only tagged the father. I was someone who once led a team of nurses, and now I was someone who loaded the dishwasher. You can elevate a person or reduce her to dust with a shrug. The thought came to me then, I could stop accepting crumbs of acknowledgement. Their assumptions do not define my legacy. I have kept papers, documents, deeds in a drawer, hidden behind old tea recipes, proof that I was never careless, only invisible, until I allowed myself not to be. I do not want to be a burden, but I also refuse to be unworthy. I have learned to let my silence accumulate strength. One day, the weight of what was ignored and broken will become the impetus for what I deserve. Maybe then they will realize that respect is not granted, it is earned. Even from their mother. Tonight, as I fold the last towel and sip a small cup of cold tea, I plan what must come next. I glance at the photo frames on the mantel, images of us as a family when love did not hurt, and I breathe in steadiness. The years I was overlooked are the years I saved in quiet conviction. The invisible work done well is not lost, it grows. And when the hour is right, I will be seen, not as a caretaker, a grandmother, or an ornament, but as the woman who built foundations they stood on. I carried that small wooden box to the table as if it held every memory I had ever saved. Inside was the heirloom necklace passed down by my mother, and before her, her mother, the pearls we wore on our wedding days, the same strands that once symbolized love, strong enough to endure war and peace. I placed it gently in my daughter-in-law's hands. I explained, voice quiet. These were worn when I walked through the hospital wards night after night. Now I give them to you, so you remember the strength that came before you. She glanced at the pearls, then at me, an eyebrow raised. She handed it back with casual cruelty. Look at your neck, Grandma. This does not match your outfit. You're not at a gala. More like a museum exhibit, don't you think? The pearls slipped through her fingers like sand. I did not retrieve them. I let them stay there, a reminder that heritage can be dismissed with a gesture. Later that evening, I sat beside my granddaughter at dinner, cupping mashed potatoes on her spoon, and I began to share a story. In the field hospital, around midnight, a bomb blast. The guest just across the table scowled, the spoons clinking. My daughter-in-law cut in sharply. Enough, Mother. We do not need war stories at the dining table. This is a family meal. She lifted her wine as if drinking to seal my silence. I set the spoon down, the metal cold and loud in my hand. The grin she offered me was polite, worn thin, and I felt the weight of years press inside me. I stood and excused myself, leaving dinner half-eaten. In her eyes, I could see the message. You have nothing here. I retreated to what has become my room, a corner of the old home office, behind stacks of paperwork and books I bought decades ago. I closed the door and turned the light low. I reached beneath the folded quilts on the old bed and pulled out a gray folder I had kept hidden, even from the bank. Inside were the deed and mortgage records, all signed in my name before my husband passed. I had taken out a reverse mortgage to help launch my daughter-in-law's business, expecting gratitude. Instead, I was thanked with indifference. The home had been valued at one point at $1.5 million, and with the loan nearly paid off thanks to my pension and frugality, it stood armed and ready. The folder snapped shut. I exhaled the weight of decades. The decades in which I allowed myself to be reduced to kind but invisible had ended. I sat on the edge of the bed and laid a hand across the documents. Gently, I thought of nights spent whisper reading to my son, mornings rising before dawn to set his lunch on a tray, the winters I shoveled snow so he could catch the bus warm. Those memories fueled a quiet resolve, a truth crystal clear. I once saved lives with my hands. Now I will save myself with my mind. The sentence fell from my lips as if carried on a breeze that shook every portrait on the wall of my younger self stylish in uniform. I folded the documents closed and tucked them into my purse, as I had tucked in bandages long ago, with purpose and care. I left the empty box sitting on my bedstand, the pearls swallowed by shadow. I walked back to the kitchen, breathing slow and controlled. I poured myself a cup of tea, lemon, the kind way my husband liked it, and I held it like a chalice. No tears came. Instead, a steady pulse of anticipation. In the quiet of the night, I sat in the living room without calling for anyone. I rifled through old mail and found the paperwork I had filed months ago. The reverse mortgage agreement, with fine print stating that upon any legal challenge or eviction, ownership would revert immediately to me. I had signed discreetly during a calm afternoon when none suspected I read the fine print. I closed the file and felt the power of foresight. I smiled faintly, not in cruelty, but in restorative justice. When I heard them retire for the night, I stayed awake. At one point, I peered into the hallway, where their doorstays lit. Then I walked down the hall, barefoot on the carpet, to stand quietly before my son's door. I did not knock. I did not call. I just placed the folder beneath his door. Quiet. Final. Tomorrow, or maybe the day after, life will change. Not because of drama or anger, but because I finally acted for myself. And when someone asks, someday, how those pearls vanished, I will smile and say, they are safely stored, just like their worth. But that is a day I do not need to rush toward. Tonight, all I needed was to reclaim myself and what is mine. And that, it turns out, was worth every unseen hour, every thankless chore, every denial of my worth. It started with a phone call. Not a confrontation, not a scream. Just the quiet beep of my old landline connecting to a law firm I had once consulted, years ago, when my husband passed. The same lawyer who'd helped us buy this house. The house my son now claimed was his, the one he said I could stay in, so long as I kept changing diapers and didn't speak during dinner. Mrs. Graham, the voice answered, warm, steady. What can I help you with today? I'd like to update the deed, I said calmly, pressing the receiver tighter. And I'd also like to review the insurance and mortgage options. Quietly. He didn't ask why. He knew. We made an appointment. Over the next 2 weeks, while they lounged and laughed and demanded extra tea with lemon, I was signing legal documents. The deed, still in my name, was reaffirmed. I added a reverse mortgage clause, filed quietly with the bank, guaranteeing that if anyone attempted to sell the home without my approval, they'd be flagged immediately. The house couldn't be touched without my notarized signature, one I kept locked in my nightstand. I also restructured the property insurance, adding a clause that flagged third-party real estate transactions and private fund transfers to unknown accounts. It was a protection against shady investors and greedy children. The insurance team called it silent guardianship. I called it survival. They had assumed I was invisible. They would soon learn I was simply watching. A week later, I overheard my son on the phone, pacing in the kitchen while I scrubbed a high chair covered in mashed carrots. Yeah, we'll flip the place next year, easy, 1.8M valuation. Mom, she's chill, won't be a problem. We'll just shift the paperwork quietly. Hell, she probably thinks we're still under the old deal. I wiped my hands, took the long way around the house, opened my filing cabinet and placed one more copy of the updated deed under a labeled folder. Emergency exit. Then came the Sunday dinner. I had made lemon herb chicken, just as my late husband liked it. My son barely looked at it before saying, too dry. My daughter-in-law didn't even sit. She was busy texting, sipping wine, and whispering to her friend about spa reservations. Midway through dinner, my son suddenly looked up. Hey, where's that envelope from Fidelity, the one with the deed copy? I had it in the drawer. He turned to me, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. I didn't flinch. Oh, I said, sipping my water. I took it. I wanted to check something. I'll return it after I'm done reviewing. There was a pause, the kind of pause that lets silence do all the talking. He nodded, but his throat twitched. His wife's fork stopped mid-air. Across the table, their daughter quietly stared at me, curious, confused. I offered a smile. I like to be thorough with paperwork, I added, then turned back to my plate. They did not speak for the rest of the meal. That night, I heard them whispering behind the hallway door. I heard words like owner, legal rights, and God, what if she changes something? The panic, so palpable now, came not from what I had said, but from what I hadn't. They had built their arrogance on the assumption that I was weak. They were just starting to realize I was not. And that was only the beginning. My son had a plan to sell this house and reinvest in a promising startup, he called it, as though I had placed myself in the same category as dusty spoons and broken chair legs. He had lawyers lined up, a real estate consultant scheduled to tour the rooms, photos prepped for promotional posts. All of this while I continued to knead biscuits in the kitchen, humming lullabies I used to sing to him. I swallowed tea, let him proceed, because I had my own suppliers of leverage. That afternoon I composed a brief letter to his lawyer and another to the insurance company that held my reverse mortgage file. In professional language, I thanked them, reminded them of Clause 27C4, which stated unequivocally that the property could not be sold without my signature as the named owner, or severe legal consequences would ensue. I sent both via fax. Yes, fax, delivered quietly to the stacks of their statements, the printer's squeak echoing in unused office corners. I didn't need to yell. I needed them to stop. It took 2 hours. My son's phone rang with a tone so sharp I could hear it under the hum of my stove fan. He swallowed. "Yeah," he muttered. "I understand. I'll call you." He hung up. The usual smug confidence drained from his posture. Later that night, I caught him pacing near the fireplace, scripts of argument on his tablet. They doubled my valuation. We're missing a deadline. He looked irritable, hand pressed against the marble mantel. No one else knew it yet, but he had lost the deal. Later, I heard him on the phone with a potential investor. "Look, I'm sorry, we hit a legal snag. The property, apparently not fully transferred." I know, thank you for your time." I did not gloat. I folded laundry in the silence. The next morning arrived with tensions thicker than the humidity. I heard raised voices in the den. I pretended not to listen, but I heard my name tossed around in whispers like an accusation. "It's Aunt Catherine who has control. She's playing the long game. What kind of mother does that?" I remained invisible. Then the real moment came. My son called an impromptu meeting. Family only. No lawyers. Just us, at the large dining table that had once held warm casseroles and birthday candles. He was sweating. He cleared his throat. "We need to talk about what's happening with the house. Who actually owns it legally?" His eyes shifted between me and the empty chair next to him, where he expected me to fade, but I didn't. I sat upright, linen napkin on my lap. I said in a quiet voice, "I do." Silence held for a heartbeat. Then I outlined as fact. The deed was updated legally 2 months ago. Reverse mortgage clause was included. My signature is still required for any sale. I consult the title company. The insurance has the amendment that flags unapproved transfers as fraud. They stared. The real estate agent quaked. My son's face turned pale. His partner let out a small gasp, swallowing. I watched them crumble, not with glee, but with a steady resolve I hadn't felt until I looked around that table and saw their despair. It was not theatrical, no shouting, no hallelujahs, only the tension in their throats, their lack of answers. One cousin, a lawyer friend, whispered to his wife, "He's sunk." Another relative only turned white, rising to leave, muttering something about nightmares and familial betrayal. I stood and walked from the room. No applause followed, only stunned silence. Later, in my room, I closed the door and exhaled deeply. I did not weep. I merely released a breath I'd been holding since the day they denied my worth. I had not sought revenge. I had only claimed justice, and in that moment at the dinner table, they realized how mistakenly confident they had been. Some weeks later, I walked down this hallway and heard my son on the phone again. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I misunderstood everything. Those words were not for me. I did not go out to receive his apology. I let them echo in the empty rooms of the house, rooms I now legally belonged to. I knew then that what I had built in silence was stronger than any shouted confrontation, because justice delivered quietly carries a weight no denial can undo. I invited them with handwritten notes, No texts, no group chats, just folded envelopes on the hallway table, each one addressed in my script. Family dinner. Sunday, no guests. 6:00 p.m. sharp. They came. Not because they wanted to, but because they were afraid not to. The tension was thick before the salad hit the table. They knew something was coming. My son sat across from me, wringing his napkin. My daughter-in-law didn't make eye contact. The cousins, the siblings, the aunts, they sat stiffly, smiling the way people do at funerals. I waited until the soup bowls were cleared. Then I stood. "I want to speak," I said, calm and clear. "Just for a few minutes." No one interrupted. "I invited you here tonight not out of spite, but to restore balance. I am not here to embarrass anyone, but I won't protect what does not deserve protecting anymore." I placed the deed, neatly folded, notarized and stamped, on the table. I did not slide it to anyone. I simply let it sit there like a quiet truth. "I am the legal owner of this house," I said, fully, without question, without obligations. It has been filed, verified, and reinforced through every possible channel. There is nothing left to argue. My son's hands trembled. His wife stared down at her shoes. I continued, "I am disappointed, not just in how I've been treated, but in the way you forgot who I was. You reduced me to a set of chores, a burden, a background figure. But I've lived more life than most people in this room. I raised you with everything I had, and when I stopped giving, you stopped seeing." I looked my son in the eye. "But I do not hate you." He blinked. His lower lip quivered. "I do not seek revenge," I said. "I simply seek respect. And now that the law recognizes my ownership, so will this family." He burst into tears. Not dramatic, not wild, but silent sobs. Shoulders shaking, a man realizing the fortress he built was made of sand. He said nothing, he did not defend himself, he did not attack. For once, he understood there was nothing he could say that would make this moment pass faster. The relatives remained still. One aunt reached for her wine glass, but changed her mind halfway. A cousin whispered, "Jesus," under his breath. I sat back down. "I will not evict you," I added, "but I will not live here as a servant. From this day forward, I am not your maid, your babysitter, or your placeholder. I am the homeowner. I will live with dignity, or I will live alone. It is your choice whether you remain in this house." No one moved. There were no arguments. I had not raised my voice. I had not called a lawyer to the table. I had simply shifted the ground beneath their feet until they had nowhere left to stand. After dinner, most left in silence. My son stayed behind. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He knew it was not owed. But he did do one thing. He folded the deed, slowly, and handed it back to me. "You're right," he said. And that was enough. For now. I signed the documents one quiet afternoon, not with triumph, but with grace. My signature curved across the line, the transfer of title fully back in my name. I sent a copy to the bank, to the insurance company, and to those I trusted. Each recipient confirmed, in their polite, professional way, that the house belonged to me now, not just legally, but morally. I composed a short note to my son, delivered with a gentle kindness that spoke louder than any text. "I no longer wish to carry burdens that do not belong to me," I wrote, "nor do I wish to weigh on your conscience. Please do not apologize. I live now on my own terms." The next morning, I packed lightly. A few dresses, my favorite shawl, photo albums, and the stack of books I had always said I wanted to read but didn't have time. The movers took the large pieces, her sofa, the dining table with its deep scratches from my husband's carving knife, his father's old bureau. They didn't ask why. No one asked why. It was understood. I moved into a small apartment not far away but hidden enough. Quiet. Bordered by a gentle street lined with old oaks, my view is of treetops and the tops of red tile roofs, and mornings are golden. I chose the room with the biggest window and the least glare. I set up my writing desk where sunlight spills, a reading chair beside the bookshelf, and I make my own coffee now, just the way I like it. I wake up when I choose to, not when I am needed. Sometimes I catch myself smiling mid-sentence, thinking about the simplicity of mornings when I read the New York Times and sip tea. There is comfort in being judged by myself again, never asked to prove my worth or justify my presence. I am not alone. Every weekend, I walk through gardens, attend book readings, sit in cafe corners and people watch. I have rejoined myself. I do not miss the drama. I do not yearn for apology. There is no need. Because apologies are words, perhaps comforting, but fleeting. What I needed most was not a pardon. I needed to be free of obligation disguised as affection. That freedom I claim today. With care, I am whole again. So if there is someone listening, someone who has carried the weight of words that never aligned with your truth or stayed in places that dimmed your light, hear me. You can choose to stay. Not because someone lets you, but because you choose to hold your space. Because your presence is not a favor, it is your right. You are not a guest. You are not a burden. You are home, and it is yours, no matter who called you something less. I wake before the sun now, no alarm, just dawn peeking through my curtains. My new apartment is quiet in a way the old house never was. There is no noise of running televisions or the clatter of silverware chased by laughter. Instead, I hear the steady rhythm of my own breathing, the soft hum of the fridge, and the occasional stir of wings outside the window. Just yesterday, I found myself smiling when I caught my own reflection, not as mother, grandmother, or caretaker, but just as Catherine, my name, still written boldly on my driver's license from decades ago. It no longer feels distant. I spent the afternoon making tea with jasmine petals. I arranged my bookshelf so old notebooks, military journals, and a stack of novels sit side by side, symbols of the past I bore and the future I now choose. On the wall, I hung a small photo, my younger self in uniform, hands steady in the ward, watching life return to the wounded. Next to it, a photo of the old house, now quiet, but owned by me, a silent testament to endurance. In the evening, I joined a local reading circle. I listened more than I spoke, just as I prefer now. An 8-year-old poet recited verses about spring buds breaking free. I felt solidarity in her words. In her courage, I heard my own once more. This is not the life I imagined after all those years, but it is the life I earned through being true to myself. A letter arrived 2 days ago, handwritten in shaky bubbles. Dear Mother, my son wrote, I am sorry for everything. I was wrong. I would like permission to visit when you feel ready. I stood in the kitchen, pen hovering over a card. I thought of the years of silent dinners, of my truths being ignored, of footsteps I followed as a child when I thought leading was guiding. I wrote back, simply, I live now by choice. I will invite you, if the time comes when you listen first, not because I tell you to. That is my peace. I walk through my day by choice, brew coffee by choice, read by choice. I remember days when love was conditional. Now love is a quiet flame I keep for myself first. To any of you listening, I hope you find this. When you are told you are less, let that be your signal, not to shrink but to rise. Let your absence teach them the value of presence. Reclaim your story, not for revenge, but for dignity. Build a home where your heart is heard. It is not the house that made me whole again. It is knowing that I belong to myself first and always. And so, this is where it ends. Not with triumph, but with a steady resolve, a life rebuilt in stillness, a woman who spoke through silence and found home. Thank you for listening to my story. If it stirred something in you, if you've ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or silenced, I hope you know now, you are not alone. Maybe they called you too sensitive, too stubborn, too slow. Maybe they rolled their eyes when you spoke, changed the subject when you remembered too much. Maybe they loved what you gave, but not who you were. I know how that feels. This story was mine, but the silence behind it, that's something too many of us recognize. And the truth is, you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to throw a plate or slam a door. Sometimes, you just need to wait long enough for the world to realize what it lost when it stopped listening. This was just one voice from a quiet room, but there are many more. Women who held their families together with bare hands and broken hearts. Women who stayed kind even when no one clapped. Women who remember everything, especially the parts others tried to forget. If you'd like to hear them, if you believe in stories that don't shout but stay with you, please subscribe to Grandma True Stories. because these aren't just tales. They're testimonies. They're what happens when a quiet woman finally speaks, not to beg, not to punish, but to tell the truth. And let me tell you something I've learned after 70 years. Revenge has no expiration date, wisdom doesn't rush, and when a grandmother speaks, the world listens. So stay a little longer, pull up a chair, and listen, not just with your ears, but with the part of you that still remembers how it feels to be invisible. Because what you hear next might just be your own story.